Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and today we'll be discussing Disney live-action films, and specifically, we'll be talking about how do you find that balance when remaking films between creating a carbon copy and changing it too much to where fans still don't like it. So to get into this discussion, I have some special guests joining me so we get lots of perspectives. So first off, I have Rachel from Rachel's Reviews. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
And then for the first time on my channel, I'm really excited to have Steve from Rewind Replay. Hi, Steve.
How you doing, guys? Great to be here. Thanks for letting me come along for this conversation. Should be a lot of fun.
And how exciting, he has a nice Dumbo poster right there in his background.
Oh, and
Lots of Aladdin too, Toy Story. I mean, it's a lot of Disney going on.
Go.
Avengers, we could throw that in. It's a full-on Disney background there for you at Rewind Replay currently. So, all three of us have already seen this 2019 remake of The Lion King. And I know I have seen, I'm pretty sure, all of the live action remakes that Disney has done, certainly the modern ones, but even going back to 101 Dalmatians, 102 Dalmatians, and I believe both of you have as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. Even as far back as like the Rudyard Kipling Jungle Book and everything as well. So
Yeah, Jungle. Perfect. So, just to get a perspective, I want to go ahead and get your general thoughts on this current era of Disney going through their properties for a handful, more than a handful at this point, I'd say, of their Disney canon, going through getting these beloved classics of theirs and turning them into variations. We'll say variations because I know even Disney released some sort of press release about how to refer to this Lion King film because it's not really live action, but it's stylized live action. But we're gonna just refer to them as live action remakes for the purpose of the film. So let's go ahead and start with you, Steve. What is your general idea and thought behind this current era of remakes?
if we're looking at it from like, say, Maleficent being sort of the reinvigoration of it and the bringing in this new era, for the most part, I think they're pretty on point. I think they're trying to take a lot more advantage of what modern technology offers them. Now they don't need to do what Rudyard Kipling did with what they did with the '94 classic, where it was a bit of a hodgepodge of technology meets some not great practical effects. But yeah, for the most part, I think they're hitting the right beats. It's just whether or not they're hitting the right market now, I think. I feel like they're still not sure who they're marketing these movies to. I'm not even honestly sure. Are they made for us who saw them all back when we were younger? Are they made for the older people who saw them back when the movies first came out? For like the movies that dropped in the 60s and 70s. Like, who are they made for, I think, is the big issue I have with them. But on a whole, I've found enjoyment with all of them. They've done just enough to modernize the messages underneath them to make them have a more modern day and relevant message for people now. So on a whole, I think they're doing all right. They could be doing better, though, I do think.
All right. And Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, so I've enjoyed some of them. I liked the Cinderella, I like Jungle Book well enough. What I don't like as a trend is sort of the idea that we're going to take something from animation, make it live action, and therefore that's an inherent upgrade that's somehow inherently better. And I definitely feel like Disney has almost always done that with the marketing of the films, even the ones I've liked. I'm like, it's not an improvement. It's not an upgrade. It's not a chance to go in and fix all of the quote unquote problems of your animated classics. And that whole attitude really is irritating because I just feel like, why can't they just sell their own new film? Like, why can't, and I feel like actually Lion King did better than most as far as this, of just sort of selling this new thing. And that's the way I wish they were going about it, as opposed to Beauty and the Beast about made me a crazy person, because the way that they were constantly talking about how we're like, this is the true feminist Belle. We're modernizing everything. We're making this like they tried to sell it as some kind of revolutionary gay pride movie, which was ridiculous, and I just really resent that, and so that makes me frustrated. But there have been a couple that have been fine. That's how I feel.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting with marketing. I think Disney themselves flip-flops on how to market these films. I think obviously with the success of Beauty and the Beast, with the success of Aladdin to this point, and the impending success of The Lion King, I think they're really going to start to see who their market is, though. And I think that is people in our general age range who have children. I think that is who they are really going to start stretching it to, because we did have The Jungle Book, which performed very well. But when you look at Dumbo's box office, when you look at Cinderella, it did fine. It didn't do great, but it did fine. When you look at all of these older ones that they've remade, they've done good, but not nearly to the hype and the level of the Renaissance films. And that's like late 20s, early 30s people who now have children that are like, I grew up with these films, I'm excited to see them again, or even like late 30s actually, because Little Mermaid was like 89.
I mean, but the thing about the Renaissance films is once they finish Little Mermaid, they're basically done.
Yeah, Mulan, Little Mermaid, because you can't do Pocahontas.
Yeah.
Cannot.
Yeah.
Not quite.
I mean, I guess you could do Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Well, that's actually gotten there was a leak only a few months back talking about how there was a script floating around for a potential Hunchback.
The problem
remake.
becomes is they've sucked the popular ones dry already. Because Hunchback, it did what it did. I guess you could do Tarzan, but it's almost like, well, everybody's done Tarzan live action. And then Hercules, there are lovers of Hercules. But I don't know.
I'm waiting for the live action remake of Emperor's New Groove. See the llama in real.
Oh, well,
What could be interesting with the ones that came out in the back 90s, like the pre-Toy Story era, your Hunchbacks, Mulan, even Tarzan, Treasure Planet, is the fact that I think a lot more of them started to ground a lot of their stories in far more human tales. Like we didn't have the big gigantic beasts, we didn't have the fantastical mermaids. Yes, we had some gargoyles moving around, but I reckon a lot of those would sort of shift in direction that Mulan's going with, removing Mushu and to try and ground the stories. And I think they'd probably adapt a bit better.
Well, really, though, in the next 2 years, they really will have finished all the popular ones. I mean, I guess unless they were to, I'm trying to think what else they could do. I mean, what are we going to get, a live action telling of the Three Caballeros? I don't see that.
I mean, I guess I could
see that happening.
Snow White. Disney hasn't really done their own Snow White. They've left that to other studios to ruin and do a terrible job with.
That's true. Snow White. I mean, I guess they could use the same technology and do Bambi.
Could they bring back the likes of, say, Pinocchio and stuff? The far more classic stories.
Yeah,
there's been talk about it, Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio for a long time.
Yes.
And that would be pretty crazy. I'd be curious to see that.
Yeah, so all of this talk, we're talking about how they're switching up Mulan. We're talking about potential switch-ups for films like Pinocchio with Guillermo del Toro's touch to it. Or, well, let's just be honest, the necessity to remove the gargoyles if they ever did. If they got to making that Hunchback, we're going to need to remove those gargoyles or do something way different with them, please. But that does bring us into kind of our topic of today. Our conversation is Disney and finding that balance of how do you change these films while still respecting the original, or do you do much more along the lines of what Lion King just did, and virtually leave it untouched and just remake what was already there. And to kick that off, I just kind of want to get a sense, so that we in the audience get a sense of where all three of us are. Go ahead and share your ranking with us on the 3 films that have come out this year. We'll start with Rachel on this one.
Well, so I have kind of an unusual, I guess, opinion about these. I would actually say I don't think any of the 3 have been great, in my opinion, but I think that Dumbo was my favorite. And I know that's probably an unusual opinion, but I don't know. I just thought it was creative enough. I thought it had some heart. I thought Baby Mine was done so well. I thought it was sweet. And so I that one's my favorite. And then Aladdin, which I liked like some of it, but then I did not like the way they handled Blue Genie. I liked Will Smith when he was like in Hitch mode as non Blue Genie. That was pretty fun, but I don't know, I just thought they sapped a lot of the humor from A Friend Like Me and Prince Ali, and I thought that some of the choices they made were just strange. Like all of a sudden at the end of the movie, we're supposed to be like Hakeem is like some major character that's making like a crucial decision. I'm like, where did he come from? I have no idea what is going on. And I don't know. And there were other stuff that just didn't quite work for me. But I was like half and half on it. I was really divided. Yeah, so that would be my number 2. And then The Lion King would be my number 3. It was just too bland for me, and I just didn't get any emotion out of these real photorealistic lions. And so I just kind of was like, not my favorite.
Okay, and Steve, what does your ranking look like?
So I've actually enjoyed all 3 for what they are. If I had to chuck them in a ranking just offhand, it'd probably be Dumbo would come in last. I feel the movie spent probably a bit too long with the humans. I get why they went ahead and did it. The original spent a lot of time with Dumbo, but they probably wanted something or felt they needed something where you had people present to engage with at some point. I would have been happy seeing the elephant the entire time, to be quite frank, but then no one's going to pay for the 64-minute movie anymore, unfortunately. I thought Aladdin was a lot of fun. Having seen the Broadway musical of it as well when it came down here to Australia last year, I was always on board with what they were going to go ahead and do with this. I could see it. They were taking a lot more notes from the stage show than I thought the movie. I just think it's more an adaptation of what the Broadway musical brought to the stage than trying to harken back to what the movie did in the 90s. So I enjoyed where they were going with it. Could have been better, in particular heading into that 3rd act. But to top it off, and my main reason for wanting to be here was I actually really enjoyed The Lion King. Was it closer to a wildlife documentary? Yeah, look, probably. But by way of a visual standpoint, technologically, I think it's one of the most impressive movies I've seen in recent memory. But because it was so close to the original, even lacking the emotion by way of the way their face is animated, I was still able to resonate with it because it drew me back to feelings that I got when I watched the original movie. So I was still able to get that connection despite the emotions not being quite as strong or brought to the screen as well as the original allowed for.
All right. So I think, oh gosh, I really flip-flop between my top 2. Okay, we'll start at the bottom. Lion King is the number 3 for me personally. It just, the other 2 had moments of magic in there for me. I still got swept into that Disney magic at points in both Dumbo and Aladdin. Lion King, even Circle of Life couldn't quite get me there. Even the big numbers couldn't quite get me there. I just kind of felt a little bit bored with the Lion King. And I don't know, I thought the pacing was off. So Lion King is last for me. The other 2, Dumbo, that second half, the new material as varying levels of success, like the Michael Keaton character, I thought I didn't really enjoy, and I didn't really enjoy Michael Keaton's performance, honestly, which I know, we all love Michael, but I'm not really sure what he was asked to do in that film. But everything with Dumbo himself, I absolutely adored and just loved. And then Aladdin, I definitely have problems, especially when Guy Ritchie put his style on the film. Like one jump ahead at the beginning of the movie with the slow-mos and the weird shaky cam as we are like going through Agrabah. I was like, oh my gosh, Guy Ritchie, stop. Like, we need you to tone down your style right now. Why are you slow-moing him randomly in the air as he's jumping over something? And having the music in the background still being this like fast upbeat music to this weird, I mean, it was very strange to me with some of Guy Ritchie isms in there, but I almost universally liked a lot of the story changes they made. They changed it just a little bit, but I enjoyed most of what they changed. So I think I'm going to put Dumbo at number 2 and Aladdin at number 1. So we all have different rankings on this one. None of our 3 rankings are quite the same. So I definitely wanted to start by talking about these rankings because I think this year has been a good example of the varying degrees of change that they are doing with these remakes. We have Lion King, which for all intents and purposes is a shot-for-shot remake. Of course, there are a couple of scenes that are different. They inserted 1 or 2 scenes. We have the new Beyonce song. But for the most part, I mean, the story plays out exactly the same. They don't add any story elements to The Lion King. Then we have Aladdin, which for the most part plays out exactly the same as the original Aladdin. However, they do actually change the story here and there, particularly with Jasmine's character. They decide to give her a little bit more fleshed out of a story. They bring in the handmaid and give that story, give Genie a little bit more to work with on the human side. And then, of course, some of the fantastical elements they take out, but for the most part, it plays out the same. The big story beats hit the same. We just move right along. And then we have Dumbo, which, as you mentioned, is only 64 minutes long as an animated film. So not only did they pad Dumbo, I mean, they stretch it to over 2 hours. They like double Dumbo in length, meaning we get a whole lot new story. So the first half plays out decently similar to the original Dumbo. We have the same start to the story, but then the entire second half is just completely new material that has nothing to do with the original animated film. And being as old as it was, with some of the problems it had, we had to change some racial tones within Dumbo for the modern day and work toward that. So that one is closer, I'd say, to something like Pete's Dragon, which is on the complete far end of the spectrum to Lion King, where pretty much the concept is there, and that's it. Pete's Dragon is pretty much a completely new film that only takes the idea of this dragon and this boy, period, puts it in a movie and gives you, you know, Mighty Joe Young with a dragon kind of thing. So, Steve, you in particular really enjoyed Lion King. What are your thoughts on them having to change the film? Because I see a lot of people complaining on Twitter. It's always going to be a big complaint of, well, everybody, you can't please people. Either you want it exactly the same, or then you complain when they change something. So what do you people want with these remakes? So we'll start with you, Steve. What are your general feelings towards it?
It's a very interesting question in that I feel Lion King in particular is one of those movies that is held at such a high regard by like any and all Disney fans that I'm not sure how it would have gone had they gone ahead and tried to shuffle up the story and change varying aspects of it. They probably could have maybe done something on the lines of Aladdin and added a few extra things in, or maybe deduct a few things and substitute them for a different approach to it. The Hamlet story has been done countless times throughout cinema, so the option was always there. But whether or not they're doing this on purpose, testing the waters across the board, and opted Disney needed to 100% change what Dumbo's message was and what Dumbo was doing from when it was originally released in the 50s till now, and sort of shift a few things up with Aladdin, but then try and stay right on the money with Lion King. Whether or not that's maybe even a marketing thing, like stay with the strongest story for the long, go with that with the Lion King, because that's a story everyone already loved. But could you have done more with Aladdin? You could probably say yes. And Dumbo definitely so. So maybe it's a marketing thing too. What will they do in future with these movies? Will they stay very close? Will they shift a few things? Or will they change them completely based on how much they end up making at the box office and how well they're received critically? Which at this point, I'd say probably Aladdin is probably that right balance for them. Good return, and it was decently well received. But by way of what they've redone with The Lion King, I definitely think there is an argument to be made that they could have gone ahead and changed things. I see a lot of validity behind a lot of the people saying that. That said, I do not think those same people who say that it needs to be, that they should have tried something different or have seen it changed in one way or another, would have liked it had they gone ahead and done so. Because anything that goes slightly wrong, this would send up another criticism on top that the story was already great and they've shuffled and changed something. So I feel like this was the movie in particular where that was going to be the hardest balance to try and strike.
Rachel?
It's really hard. I mean, remakes are hard to make. I mean, it's best if you make a remake of a movie that people don't know about that well. And then that's what something like, say, You've Got Mail, one of my favorite movies, is a remake of Shop Around the Corner that's a really good movie, but maybe not that well known. And so I think that's usually the better way to go. But I don't know. It's just, I've been thinking about this and I don't know what the answer is, because I just feel like you just have to make a good movie. And that's the problem, is that, like, you can make Pete's Dragon, which has almost nothing to do with the original film, but it was a really good movie. It was well written. It was but then you can also deviate greatly from the original, say, Maleficent, and make a terrible movie with terrible dialogue, terrible characters, terrible choices, and I'm not going to like it. And it's not because it's different, it's because it's not a good movie. And Beauty and the Beast, I just felt like so many of the choices they made, I felt like there were all the pieces there to make a good movie, but they didn't make a good movie. They had terrible singing in a musical. Why does that happen? They had choices that were horrible. Why on earth would they have this book that was awful? I hated it. And I mean, just choices that it made no sense what some people did. So it was very frustrating. And so it's not, to me at least, it's not about whether you're true to the story or not true to the story. It's about, did you make a good movie? And Cinderella, I think, is a really good movie. Like, they have a clear message that I think is unique and interesting. They had good performances. They had Cate Blanchett being amazing as Lady Tremaine. They have good chemistry between Richard Madden and Lily James. All the elements that you need for Cinderella's story are all there and all executed well. Great costumes, great, magic. And so I think that's what it, and I know that's super subjective, because what I think is a good movie is different than what other people think is a good movie. But in the end, I think that's what if it's not a good movie, if it's not executed well with good writing, good characters, it's not going to, be for me, at least. But I mean, I'll forgive a lot if I like if I think it's, it's done well. I mean, the thing with Lion King is that they were just so focused on the photorealistic lions that they forgot that, does that necessarily work with this story? Because you have what is inherently not realistic happening. You have the not realistic thing happening of lions jumping around singing. That's not realistic. And so when you're combining it with photorealism, it's not going to work. And so there you go.
I'm trying to think back. I think I want to this does make me want to rewatch The Jungle Book just a little bit, because I mean, I really enjoyed The Jungle Book. I actually think The Jungle Book might strike the best balance for me when I think back to all these films, because they do change it, but they don't change it a whole lot. But I thought they changed it perfectly. Like, they changed the ending of the movie, which I thought was a great change. I thought it was a much more satisfying ending than the animated film, for sure, because you're like, what in the world? Also, I rewatched the animated version, which I love The Jungle Book too. Mowgli is kind of a brat. He is a brat in that animated film, and they definitely toned that down. I mean, he still has his spunk. He's still running around, but he's definitely not nearly as bratty as he is in the animated film. So I thought that actually Jon Favreau's first go about it was really good, and he really changed just enough to at least improve some story elements. You can argue on all the rest, King Louis' song and all, on that being a definite downgrade from the animated original. It ebbs and flows. But I also think, I don't know, maybe Steve is a good one to ask on this. I feel like the animals emoted more in the Jungle Book than they did in the Lion King.
Well, here's interesting. I don't know if you heard, and this might not be true, but a rumor was that Jon Favreau wasn't happy with the realism of the animals in Jungle Book, that he was he wanted to it wasn't good enough. It wasn't. And so that it's kind of interesting to me that if that's the case, because he may have just been too obsessed with that idea to make it. Because I do agree. I think that it was a little bit more believable that these animals in Jungle Book were, singing.
Yeah, it is a good point, because I was actually going to mention that coming into this, that, I feel Jungle Book probably did toe that line a bit better. And the area I think they did slightly better with was the eyes had a lot more emotion to them. They expressed a lot more through the eyebrows, the underneath of the eyes, the cheeks move a lot more. Just all the animals on that movie definitely got across the expression you're after. I definitely think, for example, that Shere Khan was far more terrifying than Scar was, but I'd argue in the movies that the animated films, that was flipped. I think Scar is one of the better of the two villains by way of the animated films. And I think a lot of that does come down to the way that the emotions were handled throughout, that the faces just don't allow them to capture that way. But that's very interesting that Jon Favreau may well have been like, no, we need to push that boundary even further. This needs to be indistinguishable from watching a David Attenborough doco. But
Disney nature film.
The question I'd like to throw to you, if you look at the way these movies have been shifted and changed, the ones that have been dramatically changed are Pete's Dragon, Dumbo, Cinderella, even Sleeping Beauty becoming Maleficent. The older the story seems to get, the more that story seems to get shifted, modernized, changed in favor of what they think will sell now. Do you think that'd be something that once Lion King is a 50-year-old movie, that will end up with the Pete's Dragon version of it rather than another retelling of the exact same story?
I don't think so, just because, as we talked about before, I mean, it's based on Hamlet. So at that point, I think some of these old tales like Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid and all of this, they're just based on such older stories than their own that I don't know that they would change them all that much, where we would just get a completely new version. I mean, listen, so thankfully, I know Rachel might be on the minority on this one. I actually don't know Steve's thoughts on it. Thankfully, the CGI in The Lion King is not the CGI from Cats. So I'm going to say that. At least we did not have Simba as, Donald Glover's face, like, superimposed to this lion's body or something outrageous like that. And I hope they don't think that that's a good idea 50 years from now to have, like, the city version of The Lion King. Like, but
I'm there opening day.
I'm not sure.
That sounds like the weirdest idea I've ever heard.
It sounds outrageous. Maybe it would be so bonkers that it could work. I don't know. But Simba coming out from his job to find out his uncle killed his dad. I don't know.
When we get the remake of Lion King 1.5, live action,
how to go.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think with those, it is interesting. I guess the Jungle Book is kind of the one who stayed the closest. Cinderella stayed pretty close, I would say, to the animated film as well. They just changed. They did kind of a less severe version of the Mulan, where they're just like, we're going to strip all the music out of here and just kind of tell the fairy tale version of Cinderella. But again, that's kind of it's an older an older tale in comparison to something like Dumbo, which they just made up themselves. So
I just wish that more of them were like Mary Poppins Returns. I know that's not technically a remake, it's a sequel,
Rachel.
but but I know that movie was just so lovely to me. It had such magic. I thought it did such a great job of capturing all of what we love about Mary Poppins, with incredible cast, but giving us something new songs, new choreography, and it had such a lovely integration of the 2D animation with the live action. And I wish that these movies were more of a way to somehow sort of celebrate the medium of animation in some way, as opposed to the live action is somehow inherently better, because I feel like that's a reputation and an impression that is seeping through our culture, that oh well, we gotta make it better, we gotta turn it into live action. I'm like, no, animation's great, don't do that, don't say that. And that's frustrating to me.
I think
I love Mary Poppins Returns.
People would definitely argue on that point too. That's another form that we haven't seen in an actual remake, but is the case there is then people argued that Mary Poppins Returns what was the point of that? Like, it was very similar, I'd say, to The Lion King in some of its criticisms, as I heard a lot of, what was the point of this sequel? They basically just copied the first one, copied and pasted it, and just called it a sequel with the older kids. So that's another argument that people throw into the mix.
Yeah, I very much disagree with that, but I don't know. If we were going to do it my way, I would say, I just thought it was so lovely and so magical. I absolutely adored it. So,
which is your favorite of the live action remakes for both of you?
Well, Pete's Dragon, if that counts, as my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd go with the Jungle Book. I think Jon Favreau not only told the perfect balance between what we've been discussing, like recapturing the original story, but reinvigorating and doing something new with it, but then just by way of production value, I just love the artistry behind it all, like the way it was put together and created.
I think you said something interesting. I think when I did my ranking, it was the Jungle Book, I believe. I think it still might be. Those are my top two, actually, are the Jungle Book and Pete's Dragon, personally. So there we go. But thinking about it, my favorite parts of this latest Lion King, I really enjoyed Cub Simba, like baby Simba, more, like that's when I was more into what was happening. And I think it does have a lot to do with the eyes, because I think little Simba, he had a little bit more of an expressive face, because they were like, oh, we have to make him look cub-like, so he has to have wider eyes, the whole deal. And I thought he did get to express at least more. But part of it has to be some of these animals too. Like, it's impossible to make an actual warthog all that expressive, because their eyes are on the sides of their heads, like they have this gigantic big mouth. Like, Timon, you can still do it, the lions, you can still do it because they're front facing animals, but a warthog with this broad like side style is so difficult to try to bring expression. And another thing I think a lot of people complained was the lip syncing, the mouthing from the animals, because again, when you get into super photorealistic, it gets harder and harder to sync up human talking with animal facial structure, because their mouths just are not made to do what our mouths do. So it gets interesting there too. But that's a whole different conversation on CGI and mechanics, and do you need to make photorealistic animals sing and talk? I don't know. Or do you do what Sonic did and say, oh, we tried to make it look like how it would look in real life and you all hated it, so we need to add some sort of weird expression in here. We need to at least get into the middle ground between the cartoon or the video game you all love and actually real life. Which I think, actually, looking at it, I think Pokemon did a great job of that earlier this year, especially with Pikachu particularly, of like, we need to stay very true to the animation, but make it seem like it would be running around at least somewhat in the real world. Oh, CGI.
Well, I think Pokemon ended up getting the benefit of recreating, though based on heavily exaggerated creatures from our world. It got the benefit of being able to recreate a fake character, and all it really did to adjust them was work out for the first time ever what the textures were. Like,
yeah, texture.
how do they look? Are they scaly? Are they furry? So all it really did was add that to it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us already depicted a lot of these characters. Like Pikachu wasn't going to be a scaly mouse, but the moment you know he's a mouse, you're like, oh no, he's a furry Pokemon.
Well,
But the fur, if anything, I think accentuated what he is. He's a cute little adorable puffball. Like, he's great.
I think you could say the same thing about Pete's dragon too. You know, that they had that ability to kind of make the dragon look however they wanted. Whereas other, you know, if you're trying to make it look like real animal, then that's harder.
It's a very interesting choice on Pete's dragon to not go scaly dragon route and say we're going to make him soft and cuddly and furry,
Yeah,
and cute. We're going to make you endeared to the dragon. Personally, I was very happy they completely just ignored the original film.
yeah,
I am not a fan, so it's not one of my faves from Disney. So when I even heard they were remaking Pete's Dragon, I was like, what in the world? Okay. But I was happy with the product.
Yeah, I feel like Pete's Dragon is kind of this marvel. I just wish I could talk to David Lowery and be like, how did you do this? How did you pull this off? You made it for $70 million, which is so cheap compared to the rest of these.
Dumbo.
And it had such heart and was so different. And how did you get Disney to do this? Like, I think he has pixie dust. Like, I'm just amazed.
I think an interesting thing, especially with The Lion King 2, when we're talking about do you change it, do you keep it, how do you find that balance to satisfy us nostalgia folk, but also bring in these new kids. It's interesting looking at Mulan coming up versus The Lion King right now is, you know, people got to be prepared in the film and they were like, what in the world have you done to my song? What have you done to be prepared? I know that one in particular is a song people have had a lot of problems with. And then, but if Be Prepared were not in the film, I think we would have gotten a similar reaction to what we've gotten with Mulan of, what? You're not putting the music in. Thankfully, I think the trailer for Mulan has subsided, especially the musical component, just a little bit, I hope. Because, well, personally, I'm completely down with them just incorporating it into the original score.
Mm-hmm.
Just working the songs in that way.
I'm fine with that. The thing with the Mulan remake and that they need to be careful with is that if you are going to bill it as this realistic, gritty movie, and you're going to take away the songs, you're going to take away the magic, you're going to take away Mushu, which is all fine, then I don't think she should have sexy battle hair. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it be like, you know, flowing Victoria's Secret hair and it's supposedly be the gritty war movie. No.
Well, the thing I had issues with early on with Mulan, like the trailer, I think actually looks pretty good. I'm now starting to get behind the idea, but this flip-flopped and changed left and right between, we're doing this and it's going to be a witch and it's going to be a completely different story. And then it's going to be much closer to the original and we're going to do the music as the score instead. And the thing I had against it was when they were originally asked about the music was they turned around and said stuff like, I'll make a man out of you. He's no longer a time-relevant song, despite the fact that is arguably one of the best songs in the movie. Like, that are Reflections. But it's also the central, like, driving force of this entire movie is her coming to terms with the fact she is just as powerful as a man within the movie. Despite what everyone around is looking at, the song is still relevant to the story and the time, but they were arguing against that. That's what I have against stuff like that.
I think that goes back to kind of what Rachel was talking about. I mean, it goes back to Jasmine, it goes back to Belle, they go with this Mulan. Sometimes I don't even know, in particular with the Disney princess line, because that seems to be when they really get up in arms on their marketing and start trying to say craziness. I don't know that the filmmakers or marketers, whoever the case might be, sometimes the actors come out and say it too, Emma Watson, that I don't know that they actually understand the original film that they're remaking and the original character that they're embodying. Relegating Belle to being this, you know, passive, non-feminist character was, I thought, pretty outrageous of a claim with Belle. And honestly the same with Jasmine. Again, I did enjoy what they did with Jasmine. I thought it was a very good story to give Jasmine, but by no means do I think the original Jasmine is, such a damsel in distress and this weak woman just waiting for a man to come save her. Her entire storyline in the original animation is about her not wanting to get married and her wanting a choice in her life. This one just, I guess, fleshed that out more, I'd say. It enhanced what was already there. It was just they didn't market it as enhancing what was already there. It was, oh, we're not going to have Jasmine just waiting around for a man to come save her from her castle. And it's like, don't market it like that. And same thing with I'll Make a Man Out of You. It's like, do you really understand do you understand the film? Do you understand Mulan?
Yeah, most of their attempts to modernize their movies have been terrible. Like, for instance, also, if you are going to sell this modern Jasmine, don't have her not understand that you need to pay for things. If she's going to be the Sultan, then she needs to be smart. No, I have to pay for items in the market. Like, come on. And so, I don't know. I think that they sometimes they try to kind of have it both ways. It's like or I don't know. I feel like they have almost always failed in supposedly modernizing and like fixing the mistakes of the past have been pretty terrible.
And I know, Rachel, I think you're a part of this group that actually thinks a lot of the changes they made to Beauty and the Beast retroactively damage the animated version.
Oh man, I did a 50-minute video on my channel where I call my nitpicking of Beauty and the Beast, because there's things that just made me crazy. Like, for instance, why if Gaston is the only human being that agrees to help Maurice find Belle, why is he saying you're never going to be able to marry my daughter? Like, in a million years. I'm like, well, boy, I would be open to somebody that's actually helping me. And that's actually like, I would be open to him maybe dating my daughter. Like, just stuff like that. It's just like they were so, I don't know, they just didn't do a good job. And like the whole thing that's so moving about Belle is that she gives up her free will willingly. She makes a promise to the Beast to save her father. And she says, you have my word. And in the new version, she's just lying, and she's immediately from day one planning on escaping, planning on, like, it's just not as much a sacrifice. It's not as moving. And so you don't get as much from her character. She's just more bland, and she can't sing. And I don't know, I was just so frustrated with so many choices. Like, I hated the fact that they tried to make the household objects culpable for the Beast, and they were all like, we should have said something. He was teaching this child bad. We should have intervened, and we did nothing. I'm like, you were servants. He was the king. What are you supposed to do? Like, you're gonna tell him how to parent his child? Like, what? I was so mad. So yeah, it was very frustrating for me. And then the whole idea, it made me really mad that Belle's kiss didn't actually break the spell. The sorceress was the worst in that version. Absolutely horrible human. She comes in and she's the one. She's like, okay. And then she breaks the spell. I'm like, no, the love is supposed to break the spell. I'm so mad. So yeah, there were a lot of things that made me bonkers in that movie, and it just wasn't well thought out. It wasn't interesting to me. It wasn't well done. And so if you're gonna make changes, they should be meaningful changes. Like, for instance, at first when I saw Cinderella's dress, I was like, I don't know about that big poofy blue dress. It was weird. But then in the story, she actually wants to keep her mother's dress somewhat intact. So that's why they made it the way that they did. So that's like a meaningful change that adds to the story. Not, I have a magic book that can take me to, like, what? It made me crazy. So yeah, that's what I feel like. You need to make meaningful changes that actually like add something. And then it has to be executed well. We can't have, like in Maleficent, it made me crazy when they have, this is their one job. They have one job, the fairies. and they're letting Aurora just walk off a cliff. I'm like, three people to watch one child.
Well, Maleficent, my big problem with Maleficent was a bait and switch. Again, the marketing, the marketing pulling a complete bait and switch on what the movie was delivering. That was my big problem with Maleficent. Also, the fact that they, I don't know, again, either they completely changed the character. It's one thing to change like little bits and pieces and change elements of a movie. It's another thing to have a film about this titular character now and completely change her. Like, just nothing, almost nothing other than that coronation scene of the Maleficent that we knew from a different story. I don't care who told the story. That's quite the change. I mean, that is the version of winning the war versus losing the war, I guess. And even that. And they even changed the end. I mean, that's not even the truth, because the winning side is no longer the winning side in the film you've made. We've changed to one. Like, oh, okay, revisionist history.
I mean, I could be fine with changing everything. I really could. People think I wouldn't, but I would if it had been executed well. But all they did was take an amazing villain and replace her with a not so amazing villain, with a terrible performance, with an annoying, and made her just this like victim. And so like her like cursing this child makes no sense, because you're just like, what? And then the day after, she's like, all of a sudden her basically her fairy godmother. You're like, what is happening? And how could she be more involved in Aurora's life than the fairies? Like, I know they're kind of silly in the original, like baking the cake and stuff like that, but come on. I was I'm so frustrated.
With Maleficent was like it took arguably widely considered Disney's best animated villain, certainly one that's now got like a lot of modern weight as well. Like even younger people recognize she's a fantastic villain, at least in the animated movie. But they made her vindictive, which is to say that at some point she was wronged or thinks she was wronged, rather than just being a straight out evil character, which what I think made her so great is she was just pure evil.
Powerful and evil.
Exactly. And going back to Beauty and the Beast, which I've actually watched that video you did, Rach. That's actually quite funny. But the thing that actually annoyed me is I reckon the most powerful scene in the entire movie is when Beast lets Belle go, and Beast goes to the top of the tower and just lets out one big roar, like he's given up his one chance, his one love. And in the animated movie, I think that is such a powerful scene. Like he is now sacrificed the same way she sacrificed to be with him in return for her father. And instead they turn it into a marketing opportunity to go ahead and have a Josh Groban song chucked in there so they can put it on the radio, which only makes them break down what one roar did in 10 seconds, and everyone understood. They're like, no, we're done now. You need to go ahead and explain it. And they did it over the course of a 3-minute song, basically telling you that he is sad.
That is so true. Also, if you want to make your singers sound better, don't have Josh Groban do a version of the song. Like, it just made it seem even worse. Like, what?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of, like, as you said in there about the meaningful changes. Again, like I said, I think the ending of the Jungle Book is one of the best changes they've made. A change that makes sense to what the story was that we've had, not this random girl that hypnotizes Mowgli into the town, all of that nonsense. Like at the end of the original Jungle Book, I mean, I guess was okay for what it was, but that is a good, meaningful change. And I agree. If it's not going to have weight, if it's not actually addressing something, say Dumbo, for instance, if you're going to remake Dumbo, you cannot put those crows in there. Like, it's just 100%, the crows cannot make the new film. So you have to make that change. So I think if you're not going to, one, either rectify an actual issue in the original film, if you want to retell this story with a more modern lens, and it is something that is actually offensive, actually racist, actually sexist, that pretty much everyone agrees on. It's not as much of a debatable, I don't think so, like Cinderella. I think that's a cause for change. Or two, if if it's something that does mean something, like we've said, the Cinderella's dress, I think, is a great example. Whereas they changed up Belle's dress for not really a good reason, and it just didn't look that good. So you have two varying levels, and they brought her mom into the story. So, I mean, they could have tried to do something there. I don't know. I think that was an attempt at something meaningful. Is let's bring her mother into the story and add some weight. It just turned into something more convoluted. So,
yeah, because it wasn't executed well.
Yeah.
Because why on earth, if Maurice and Belle are so close, why on earth would he not tell her that her mother died of the plague? It's not like it's some kind of like
Scandal.
embarrassment. Like, oh, why
You ran away with another man. She
Yeah,
never
like
actually died.
It's not like it's some kind of embarrassing way to die. So it makes no sense. Also, supposedly they moved to the country in order when Belle was a baby to avoid the plague. That's not the way the plague worked. The plague was everywhere. You don't move to the country to avoid the plague. So that made no sense. It was stupid.
But yeah, so I'm trying to think of really good and meaningful changes. Again, we changed the whole of story of Pete's Dragon, so I don't think we can really even take that much into account because, I mean, when you change the whole thing, then what are we talking about meaningful change for?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's definitely an interesting one. And thinking of something like The Lion King for those that would argue that a carbon copy, this type of Psycho or Lion King remake that is virtually shot for shot, is not necessary. I think definitely Rachel and I are probably on the same page with this one, that I don't know that it necessarily needed to be changed. I don't know that we necessarily needed a whole lot different within the film. I think it is just the fact of change if it's needed, but the emotion, the magic was just lacking for me personally. The magic wasn't there. It was a beautiful film, but even sometimes I thought the CGI, I hate that it got leaked. Again, who leaked this? I mean, this came out, it had to be a critic or somebody who got like a really advanced screening. Leaking Mufasa's death online was like outrageous. And I wish it wasn't out there. I don't think that scene looked very good personally. Even seeing it on the big screen, I was like, you know what? No, it might translate better, because unfortunately I did see it scrolling through Twitter. It was there. I was like, oh God, why? Why do people do these things? Again, when you get into photorealism, it turns real wonky, because the way that Mufasa's body had to like fall looked strange. Even the zoom looked strange to me. I don't know. There were some also transitions. I thought transitioning in the live action film was very clunky personally. And I think it's virtually very similar to the animated film. It just doesn't quite translate as well. But honestly, I mean, I say maybe we could have fleshed out Nala or Sarabi a little bit, or those female lions, because they don't get much. I mean, giving it the Aladdin treatment is really the only way I could have seen an okay change. Like, I didn't mind the Nala sneaking off of Pride Rock scene. I thought that was a fine addition. Again, it didn't change the story at all. It was just kind of an added scene in there. So I don't know.
I just think the direction with Aladdin, I really do think that Aladdin is a far more direct take from the musical format. Like, right down the way they've done the genie, the way they added she had a handmaid, whereas on the stage they obviously didn't have a tiger there for various reasons. But I'm glad
that Raja made the cut for the film, though.
Yeah,
personally,
definitely.
I'm glad Raja was in there.
But could the Lion King have potentially looked at its stage version, which does actually have changes? Like, they actually incorporated a song cut from the original with the morning news. So could they have gone ahead and maybe added stuff like that back into this movie and take a closer look at what they did with the stage show, which has been just as popular?
Yeah, I was a little disappointed they didn't have He Lives in You.
I was say it's on the soundtrack, and then I was watching the film waiting for it. I was like, oh, nope, they didn't actually put it in the movie.
Like, I know it's in the credits, but I would have loved to have seen that. And Shadowlands is such a beautiful song That would have been fun for me.
I also really like that new Elton John song over the end credits too. I don't know if they should have put it in the movie, but I thought it was a good song over the credits. I was like, so I do like those type of nods of like, Elton, come make a new original song for this film as a nod to the work you did on the original film, or those type of nods I usually enjoy. But as I said on Twitter, part of me is like, why did we even have James Earl Jones come in to record? Because his lines of dialogue are 95% the exact same as the animated version. And I don't know if it's his age or if it's a lack of enthusiasm. Again, I just don't think he delivered, quite the emotional, impactful performance that's present as Mufasa. It was there because when you have that big, booming, deep voice, you're always going to have a presence no matter where you go. It will just fill up the room, period. But he just seemed not as there. It seemed a little bit, I don't know if it was phoning in or if it's his age, again, because he is getting quite up there in age and hasn't been on the marketing as much. But I don't know, that was a distraction for me even in the film of like, you should have just paid the man some royalties for using his voice again and just use the version from the animation, because I don't know.
It's a tricky thing. I don't have all the answers, but I don't know. I
Certainly.
just feel like the approach of kind of like, I don't mind a formula film if it's executed well, and you could say that, like, say Mary Poppins Returns follows a Mary Poppins formula. That's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that. But if it's I don't know, they just have to find that kind of balance of leaning on things, but then also kind of making it their own. It's tricky. I don't know.
You mentioned way back at the start, Rachel, that you said they need to make a good, like, just simply make a good movie.
Yeah.
Would you argue, like, the good movie, is that coming from the story and emotional perspective, or like, all the technical stuff, the music, the score, the direction, the cinematography? I feel on a technical aspect, this movie is just as good as the original.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously it's a very modern movie. It just lacks the color palette due to the realism and the emotional aspects of it, which very valid arguments. But there's a lot of people saying it's just simply not a good film. But on a technical aspect, I do not see where people can pull this apart.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on the photorealism is very well done.
Amazing.
There's no doubt about it. But if you're taking the animation as total, the emotion is a huge part of a component of, so you can't kind of excise that out of the technical aspects of the film. And so the animation didn't succeed. I don't think it's nearly as good as the original, because the original, I'm so emotionally invested in what's happening to Simba and what's happening to all the characters. And so no, I would not put it on the same level because the artistry just isn't there for me, even though, because emotion is an important part of art. And but I'm not saying it's not impressive what they accomplished, but you got to have, I don't know. So that's how I would say. And obviously it's like super subjective. What I think is a good film is different than what other people is a good film. But I do think that story trumps all in the end.
Oh, yeah, I think I could have enjoyed it more even with them going for a more realistic approach, because I actually didn't mind, like, Just Can't Wait to Be King as a segment in the new film. Of course, they were not going to do what they ended, much like Beauty and the Beast with Be Our Guest. I actually think this was more successful at recreating the big showpiece and Be Our Guest. I thought Be Our Guest did not do the original number justice at all. But this, I thought, it did what it could within the scape of what they were doing. I really enjoyed those little baby animals, particularly. I think that's maybe why I liked it, is because we got like a little baby animal moment with all the little elephant, the little rhino. So I was like, oh yes, look at the cute little animals. I struggle to think of, I guess it's definitely one of those situations where if you're taking this based on what they set out to accomplish, then I guess this is a success, because I think Jon Favreau probably accomplished what he set out to accomplish. And he created the film that he set out to create. So in that regard, it's certainly just a success. He made the film he wanted to make. I don't know if it's the photorealism for me. I think that definitely plays a part in it. It definitely does. Just, I don't know. I think even the big musical numbers didn't work the same, even though I think the vocal talent was there for the most part, especially J.D. McCrary, who I think should definitely get some praise, because that little boy's got some chops, and I thought he killed it on his vocals. But I don't know, they just didn't hold the same weight. They didn't hold that same big magic for me. It was actually part of my problem with Aladdin too, is they went the more Broadway version, going off of that. And they just, I don't know, the choruses in Aladdin were like so little behind the voices. And I'm just like, no, especially on like something like Prince Ali, I need big. Like, I love those big booming choruses. Dang it. That's what I want right now.
Yeah, I did feel kind of like the Aladdin was sort of the cruise show version of Aladdin. Like, it wasn't,
oh, girl.
Oh.
That wasn't even shade. That was like just like a stab to the side.
I was just kind of like, nah, yeah. I don't know. I love animation, and so it's always going to be hard. This whole process is going to be hard, but I don't know. I just feel like the ones that have worked for me, the scripts have been better and tighter, and I don't know.
And it's so hard and that's when it does become difficult. It becomes difficult to judge The Lion King against Beauty and the Beast, even, or Dumbo, certainly, because it's working with an adapted script that was like 90%-ish adapted and taken from the original, whereas these other ones, when it comes to story, I mean, clearly, Lion King, you like the story. We enjoy the story. On paper, you like what you're given, whereas something like Dumbo, who knows if we're going to like what we're given, because they're adapting a story, but they're only adapting like 20% of the story. So it's tough. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get just kind of final thoughts on the remakes and your final takeaways from it. And we'll go ahead and start with Steve on this one.
I'm always going to be open to pretty much anything getting remade, so long as the idea holds weight and merit. And I don't think there's necessarily even a time frame on that. Like, if they look at how they churn out and reboot things like Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, it takes them only like 3 years for everyone's forgotten. So I'm not even someone who believes that there's a time frame necessary for it. Like, so long as you've got a decent premise, a good idea, and you can execute on it well, I'm well and truly open to seeing remakes get made. But the thing I think is so good about these, maybe even unfortunate, is the fact that it opens up conversation like this. What should they do? How should they improve things? Where were the weaknesses and what were the strengths? And how do you find that good middle ground? Conversations like this need to happen. It just needs to happen at a much higher level with the people who actually have an impact on what these movies do. And I think at the end of the day, if we don't like movies like this, we're in a bit of an interesting field, given we're critics on YouTube, and we need to stay relevant. So we need to keep watching these movies. But ultimately, our wallets are going to be the big effect on whether these movies keep getting made the same, word for word, beat for beat, or whether we start seeing some changes moving forward, like whether or not they go ahead and be like, you know what, word for word did not quite fit as well as we had hoped it would. Maybe next time we'll try to shuffle in a few pages and see how things come out the other end. So I think it's just a really good discussion that needs to happen at a much, much higher level.
And I think maybe Mulan is going to be a very interesting test. It's a popular Renaissance film that they're changing a lot. So if it bombs, that spells not a good look for those people who are not wanting Lion King and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast. So Rachel, what about you? What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very tricky thing. I just wish that these remakes were more of an excuse to celebrate animation films as opposed to supposedly improving them and modernizing them. I wish that they took that approach, which I feel like they did in Mary Poppins Returns. It was a chance to celebrate the original film, and I think that's why it really worked for me so much. I think the ones that do work to for me make meaningful changes. They have the scripts that I think don't lean on the original and nostalgia. They're good movies on their own, and they can stand on their own as good movies. And I think that the a lot of times the problems I have is just like, did you really think this through, that this would work in this new version? Or were you just doing this to sort of placate nostalgic fans? But did you really think of your own thing? And does this make sense with your story? And if you're telling a photorealistic animal story, do you want to have them singing and dancing about? That doesn't make sense. So I think that's sometimes where the disjunct kind of doesn't work, and where it doesn't quite upgrade it. It's not satisfying to those nostalgic fans, and it's not something really new that lasts for, they say, oh, well, we're introducing these to new generations. I don't buy that. I don't think that I think these movies make a lot of money and then they're very quickly forgotten and don't make a lasting legacy like the animated films. And even Disney, I feel like, basically acknowledges that with the fact that almost all their merchandising is for the animated film. If you look up Belle on Disney in the Disney store, almost all of it is the original animation, not the new version. And it's
not that new Justin Bieber lookalike Barbie they released.
Yeah, even in the parks, you don't see the new versions of the characters. You see the original versions of the characters. So I think like even Disney, I feel like, kind of admits that this is not a new legacy for kids. These are made for adults who have nostalgia for these properties. And I think that that's why it's so tricky as far as making that meaningful change. But I still think you got to look at it as its own movie. What is it trying to say? And does the things that we're doing, do they work within this movie? And then we're going to sell it on its own movie. And I feel like the ones that don't work don't think of it that way and are thinking of it more as either an upgrade or somehow some kind of homage to the original. And whereas I think something like Mary Poppins Returns really focused on making this new story. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. It's tricky, but all I can do is judge one movie after another movie after another movie and give my thoughts. And if I end up liking it or not liking it, I try to go in as open as I possibly can when I'm in that seat, even if the marketing makes me bonkers.
Yeah, I think definitely right now it's an interesting place for Disney live action, because I do see people saying, well, why do they keep turning out these remakes? We want more original films. But much like the case, like many of us, cinephile type of people yell and scream from the rooftops in general with cinema, nobody goes and watches the original Disney live action movies. They pretty much universally bomb. Now, well, we could talk all day about the quality of those movies as well as the marketing or whatever, but I struggle to remember the last live action Disney film that did not just do poorly at the box office. People don't go to see them. So what is Disney going to do? They're going to go with the one that people love to go to the theater and watch, and that is the live action remakes. So that's just simply the case. But unfortunately, I also do think at a larger scheme, Disney is hurting themselves a little bit in terms of just straight up image, because I think a lot of people view something like The Lion King, I don't know, this has validity. I think there's an argument to be made for it, against it, as cash grabs. And that's kind of what a lot of people blanket the entire live actions under is Disney right now is just in recycled cash grab mode, period, point blank. And they're taking over Hollywood, buying out studios, cash grabbing, and then have the audacity in Dumbo to vilify corporate America and taking over small business. But it's a lot of nerve, Disney. But I think it's just an interesting thing. It's an interesting place for Disney to be in. And, you know, as both Steve said, and then talking about the box office here, we as consumers do definitely have a play in it. And, you know, you hear it often, but people, whether you're going to hate watch it or whatever you're going to do, they don't know that. And the bottom line is you just helped push it over $1 billion with your box office. So it's interesting, and we certainly want to hear from you all. What do you think? What is the solution? Can you become the next Disney executive? We're trying to get people that have a solution. But regardless, let us know. How do you feel? Do you enjoy the virtual shot-for-shot remake version of the animated film, just in maybe a new medium? Or do you prefer when they deviate from it, something like Dumbo, where they're forced to come up with new plans, come up with new ideas? Or are you more down with something like Pete's Dragon, where we just take the name alone, we take the general character and throw literally everything else about the old movie out the window and just make something fresh? Let us know all of your thoughts and opinions, as well as just kind of your general thoughts on the Disney live action remakes as a whole. Also, before you head on out of here, let's go ahead and I want to thank my guests one more time for coming on. So, Steve, thank you again. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you across the internet?
No, thanks for having me, both Larry and Rachel. This has been a heap of fun, and finally getting to work with both of you was well worth getting up at 2 a.m. But you can find me at Rewind Replay and Rewind Replay AU at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I just like to talk movies and just build a community of people who likes to get deep down into the discussion, much like we have here. So if that's what you're into, come join me. Let's have a good talk.
And then thank you all again, Rachel, for being here on the channel. Why don't you go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you across the internet?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on your channel. And I love talking animation and family films over on my channel. I do Family Movie Night every Monday, and I do Talking Disney podcast once a month. So it's super fun. And so check it out, Rachel's Reviews. I also have the Hallmarkies podcast, which is just reviewing the best of cinema. So it's so fun.
Yes. So please make sure, if you're not already subscribed to both of these amazing channels, that you head on over and show them some love and give them a big subscribe and enjoy the content they have to create. All of the channel links as well as social media links will be in the description down below. And obviously, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe to my channel so you're always up to date on my latest videos. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.